I read in the paper this morning there was some proposal. Should we have a Department of Government Efficiency in the UK? Well, yes, please. There's an expression which you're very familiar with: God laughs when man makes plans. And of course, that means 50% of what happens to you in your life is not what you plan to do, but what happens to you. And of course, there's a lot of things happened since the government came in, and indeed before the government came in, which have made any plans they might have more difficult to achieve.
So within that, they're saying cutting red tape, regulation will stimulate, for example, house building. Is that going to work?
Well, in theory, of course it works, Adam. But we've had a lot of talk now. We've had 7 months of this government, and we've got a very simple equation to try and fix. We either grow more, or if we don't grow more, we have to tax more. And if we don't tax more, we have to spend less. And in fact, what we have to do is we have to do all three. Now, we've heard a lot of talk about cutting red tape, the bonfire of red tape. We've heard a lot about getting rid of planning regulations and making it easier to plan. We've heard a lot more about stimulating growth. But we have to actually give consumers, and that's what it's all about, the electorate and consumers, the feeling that there is a clear runway ahead and that they can go out and live their lives with some idea that things will be relatively stable. And at the moment, they don't feel that way.
So how can you do that? Is it a question of, for example, taxing the whole population rather than taxing business?
Well, it's very easy for me to say this, of course, as a businessman, but clearly I think the government got itself into a trap when it did what it did in the budget last year. It did put the burden on bringing on the necessary taxation they said they needed to impose on business, and they closed the door to doing some other things. They could have put the price of petrol up. They could have put VAT up. They could have put income tax up. They could have let themselves less boxed in. But in reality, the one area that has not been dealt with and we haven't yet seen, and we're all waiting to see, is what is going to be the result of the public sector spending review, which I believe is delayed. But if that doesn't come till June, that will be a year since the government took over. And I can tell you, I'm not an economist, but I've been around a long time. There's only one thing that we need to do. We need to cut some spending in some places to afford spending in other places whilst these growth initiatives start coming through. And that means welfare, and that means waste, and that means the National Health Service. And, I read in the paper this morning, there was some proposal, should we have a Department of Government Efficiency in the UK? Well, yes, please.
Where would you cut welfare, for example?
Well, it's very clear now, as we know, and you don't need me to tell you this, that with the 9.3 million people economically inactive, with the burgeoning of welfare claims that's happened since COVID, that we are paying out money to people who frankly shouldn't be getting it, and we should be putting incentives in place on the supply side to reduce taxation, to make incentives to get back to work, and go down that route. But this is not a quick fix. This is going to take time, and I fear this will see this government out in 29.
See it out? You mean that they'll lose the election?
No, it'll need a new government, whether that is the Labour Party getting re-elected or somebody else, but it's not going to happen in 4 years.
And where do you stand on what seems to be a new pressing priority of increasing defence spending?
It's absolutely essential. Listen, the military themselves use an expression which no plan survives contact with the enemy. We have cut ourselves off from Europe 5, 6, 7 years ago. We are a supplicant to the USA, and we've learned that the hard way in Europe this week. We are afraid of China. We've got fewer friends in the world. We've done no significant trade deals, and we're living above our means. So we've got to actually now decide where our priorities are. And frankly, if I'm a citizen of the UK PLC and I want a government to be active, looking after my interests, if the decisions need to be made, which are tough decisions, I want the tough people to make the tough decisions. And one of them is increasing spending on defence.